This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture.
Welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. I'm really excited for today's special guest, Steve Cuss. Steve is an author, leadership coach, speaker, and founder of Capable Life. We met Steve actually a little bit over a year ago when he spoke to our group of financial advisors here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Steve's written a book called Managing Leadership Anxiety, Yours and Theirs. I highly recommend it. As I mentioned, he founded an organization called Capable Life. We'll have the link to that in our show notes. But that's an online community that helps people address anxiety, relieve pressure, and ultimately help them be better connected to one another and aware and present. And so Steve is going to share a little bit of the story, but I'll share some more background relative to how he got into this. So Steve was a chaplain in a pastoral role for 26 years, working in a hospital system, trauma and hospice, which is obviously pretty intense. He has served as a lead pastor as well. So he's got a very strong faith background, which I know we'll chat about. And he's spoken and worked with a number of companies, including the Colorado University Hospital Systems Neuro Research Organization, Magnolia Home Furnishings, and Chick-fil-A, and a B-Mobile Verizon franchise. So you're going to detect in Steve's voice that, yes, he is a Aussie native. He grew up in Perth, West Australia, which some great memories as well with his family of origin, being outside, being adventurous. He moved here to the United States, ultimately to study theology, where he married his wonderful wife, Lisa, and they now have 2 sons and a daughter. He lives out west, and when he's not working, he's doing some fun stuff, laughing with his family, which we'll, I'm sure, talk also about the importance of humor, trout fishing, and playing guitar. So, Steve, thanks for being with us.
Tim, it's a great pleasure. Thank you very much. A very kind introduction.
Well, this is a really important topic, and Amanda and I were preparing. I know I'm with you today, but I was sharing with her some of the things that your talk meant to me, which I certainly will get into. I'll share a little bit of vulnerability, but you've done a great job in the work you've done. And I think maybe the first place we could start is really just, you spent years helping leaders identify and address anxiety, both in themselves and their organizations. But something you talked about when you were with us, and something that really hit me profoundly, is you talked about the difference between stress and anxiety. Can you unpack that some more, Steve?
Yeah, well, anxiety, it's a big, big word. And the problem with the word is it covers too much territory, I think. Mm-hmm. So clinically, there's all kinds of anxieties, and it gets challenging. They all are generated by different dynamics. So, for example, when you see a poisonous snake, like in Australia where I grew up, that's one kind of anxiety. But then when you lose someone precious to you, like grief, that's a whole different kind of anxiety, and they're generated by different things. And my field is a kind of anxiety called reactivity. And what's fascinating about reactivity, I think is fascinating, is 2 things. One is it's the only anxiety that's contagious. So we catch it and spread it like wildfire relationally. When we get within proximity to another human being, reactivity begins to spread. The second thing that's fascinating about it is it's always based on a false need that feels real in the moment. Yeah. So, for example, one of my false needs might be to be understood. And if you and I are chatting, Tim, and not only do you misunderstand me, but maybe you ascribe motives to me that aren't true, I get really reactive. Mm-hmm. Even though objectively, I know I'm fine. If I take a step back, I say, look, I can be misunderstood. The world still spins. But in the moment, my body actually has a small version of seeing a snake. My body tells me that I'm in danger. And it's really wild. So the difference between stress and anxiety, this is what generates burnout, is untreated reactivity over time. Most leaders, they initially think burnout is due to too much work. But actually, most leaders I know really like having a lot of work. We get motivated by a big challenge. That's not the problem. The problem is the people we work with, getting sucked into the drama, not knowing what to do with that employee that's always late, having a thin skin and not being able to deal with criticism. That's what leads to burnout. And that is all related to reactivity.
Yeah, that was, again, when you spoke to us last year, I had not ever heard of that. And I know personally, I've always defined what you just described as reactivity anxiety as stress. And obviously, anytime you're dealing with something like that, the first and most important thing is awareness. So, what are some of the ways that this reactivity anxiety shows up in leaders? And again, I would say for myself, I didn't even realize it. I was, again, just saying I was stressed.
Yeah. What you're looking for is anytime you've become bigger or smaller than human-sized. When we are human-sized, we are able to notice God's presence. Mm-hmm. But every human being, when we're under pressure, when we're carrying too much stress, we cope by either trying to get bigger than the problem and dominate it. So what that would look like is if you're in a meeting, you're no longer listening to learn. You're now listening to fix or mansplain or put someone in their place, or suddenly you have to be right rather than being able to hear what someone is saying. This is really easy to see on social media with political conversations. And I know, it's hilarious. It's awful and hilarious, but
it's funny and it's not, right?
That's right. If you want to understand contagious reactivity, just go on your favorite social media platform and make some kind of a generalized statement about politics. And what's crazy is you look at all the responses, and I just look at all the comments and I think, what do you think you're doing right now? What do you actually think you're accomplishing? Because the poster and the commenter are no longer connected at all. They are wildly disconnected from each other. And so that would be an example of getting bigger. Now, some people get smaller than human-sized, and most leaders are prone to getting bigger, but you can really pay attention to your team and you can start asking yourself, who no longer speaks up in staff meetings? Who has their own secret meeting after the meeting? And what happened? What caused that person to no longer feel like they can be exactly themselves? So being human-sized is when you can now be exactly yourself. Nothing to lose, nothing to prove. And I can present my full self to you, and you can choose to like it or not. That's okay. I can deal with a high level of conflict and a high level of disagreement and a high level of ambiguity. That would be evidence that I'm human-sized. When we're bigger than human, we forget the Lord because we're taking God's place. God's no longer the judge. Now I'm the judge. I'm deciding that you're wrong and I'm right. And, self-righteousness, right? Smaller than human size, we forget the Lord because God's no longer our refuge and strength. We are now our own refuge and strength. So it gets really interesting, but that's what you're looking for in yourself is you're noticing when you're triggered, and then you're trying to notice your coping mechanisms to cope with your triggering. It's hard to do, but once you see it, you'll never unsee it.
Yeah, I can share in my own personal experience. That's a great way to say it. Once you see it, you can't see it. Because again, I always was like, I'm stressed out and this is stress. And, just got to find myself in situations that are less stressful. But until you can identify it for what it is, it's hard to deal with it. So once someone has begun to recognize this type of anxiety in themselves, Steve, what can you do to address it? What are some of the practical and maybe not so obvious pathways to address it?
Yeah. So what typically happens is you start to notice it, and then it's like you're Spider-Man, where it's like, too much information coming in, because it's like an invisible force that's always been there, but you start to see it, and then you start to look back on your life and see, oh my goodness, it's been with me the whole time. It can be overwhelming. So what we encourage everyone to do, Tim, is take the high jump bar and just put it on the ground. Just take that high standard, put it right on the ground, and just try to pick out of, rather than getting 100%, see if you can get 10%. And what that looks like is pick one meeting a week, one relationship, and just start noticing. Don't even do anything different. Don't say anything different. Don't act different, but just notice the dynamics with one person, one meeting, and it really helps. And you'll be surprised, even that meeting will be different just because you're noticing. You're kind of in it, but you're also observing it almost like a sociologist. And what you're noticing is the spread of reactivity. And it's kind of fun. And then the deeper work, Tim, is you start to notice, oh, wow, not only am I noticing anxiety spread, but it's the same pattern every time. Like in this staff meeting, Jim's always the one that uses the most words. Sally never speaks up unless she's called upon. These three always have their own secret meeting after the meeting and nothing changes. So you kind of start with noticing, then you notice patterns. Now you're off to the races. And then the longer term work is probably beyond the scope of a podcast, but you learn how to name it.
Yep.
So first you notice, then you name it, and then you learn how to diffuse it. And when you're naming it, if people want to start naming, you always name your own contribution. You never, in the early days, you never point the finger and name someone else. So you don't walk into a room and say, Sally, you're smaller. Jim, you're getting bigger. Instead, you walk into the room and you say, I've spent the last couple of meetings just noticing our dynamic, and I was hoping we could all talk about it. I think I get bigger in meetings. I think I have a low tolerance for silence, and I tend to need to fill it with words, and I just want you to know I'm working on that. What do you notice? And then people, if you go first, they'll generally be quite excited to share if it's a safe environment.
Yeah. Open up the floodgates.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
How about, outside of a team dynamic, Steve? So, as I was sharing with you, when I heard your talk, I started to really become aware of my own challenges with anxiety. Again, I was labeling it stress and trying to deal with it as such. How would you say people should approach recognizing that in themselves, and what are some of the things at an individual level, a leader can do to address that?
Yeah. I love the way you asked that, Tim, because I do think we are prone to think that stress is coming at us from the outside. And of course it is. Of course, most people have, quite frankly, stressful jobs. If we just talk about the job description, what is your vocation in this world? Usually pretty challenging.
Yep.
But what eats us up isn't the job description, it is the relational dynamics. And so there's two things that a leader can do. One, if you can learn to notice what's coming at you versus what's coming up from inside of you, I can't begin to describe how much relief you will feel, even if you don't do anything about it, just noticing. So, for example, I'm a pastor. I'm a pretty sensitive guy. I'm a people pleaser. Criticism cuts me pretty deep, to be honest. Okay, so maybe I preached a sermon and, I don't expect your audience to understand the psychosis of a preacher, but after you preach a sermon, pretty vulnerable. For the audience, just picture singing a cappella in a room. It's kind of like that. After you're done, you're like, was that okay? Was I in tune? Preachers kind of have the same issues. So then the sermon's done, the service is over, I'm down front. And, some people want to come down for prayer and to chat, but some people want to come down to give me a hit. They want to take a shot at me. And before I did this work, I couldn't tell between their criticism and my inner critic, or their criticism and my need to be needed and impressive. It all got jumbled.
Jumbled up.
Yep. But once I started to notice what's going on in me and working on that, my resilience to tolerate them went through the roof. I no longer needed them to behave a certain way for me to be okay. So that's the first step. And then the deeper step is you're trying to line up the way you treat yourself with the way God treats you. And that's also hard to do. Most of us are harsher on ourselves than God is on us. And the way I encourage people to begin is just pick 2 or 3 ways that you treat people you love and begin to treat yourself the same way. So I check on my friends. I was not checking on myself. I believe my friends when they tell me they're struggling. In contrast, I tell myself to buck up and dig down and get on with it. I tend to be, it's not really so much a football. Yeah, but it's not like a football coach, like a motivator. It's kind of this shame-based guy. So just changing the way I treat myself really, for me, opened up the floodgates of being able to experience God's love more. And again, it then makes me need less out of people, and I'm more able to connect to people rather than be on guard against them.
That's powerful. You've seen, obviously, you described kind of a scenario in the workplace. You've seen lots of different organizations. This may be an obvious question, Steve, but in an organization where this type of anxiety exists and it's not addressed, how does that kind of manifest itself? And what are some of the characteristics of that?
Yeah, that's a really important question. in almost every organization where I consult, sometimes I'll come in and people are wanting me to help them understand the dynamics. They're feeling something, but they can't figure out what it is.
What it is, yeah.
I do some very simple things. And what I love about this is anybody can do this. It's not like I'm gifted or a genius. It's actually anybody can do this. So take a look at your organization and ask yourself 3 simple questions. Number 1, who's generating most of the anxiety in the organization? And yes, you have to name names just to yourself. Don't announce, hey, don't announce it in the staff meeting. Hey, yeah, just start privately. Okay, who's generating the most of it?
Now.
Yeah. Second question, who's carrying it? You start to see the problem right there. And then the third question, how are the carriers adjusting themselves? We call it micro adjustments. What micro adjustments are the carriers making to keep it all the same?
Interesting.
And what you see is over time, people who generate the anxiety, maybe they lecture. I've seen this where people complain and the boss gives them a lecture like they're a little kid. Okay, that's not helpful, but now the team, they just take it. Well, that communicates to the boss that that's okay to do.
Yeah.
And I understand there's power dynamic. It's a challenge, but over time, oftentimes months and years by the time I'm brought in, the boss has been lecturing the team for years now. Or maybe it's not a lecture. Maybe the team are right and the boss is wrong, but because he's the boss, he's right.
Yeah.
This is a really common dynamic I run into in Southeast Asia. If the leader is older in Southeast Asian culture, there's obviously generalization. If the leader is older, they're right. It doesn't matter if they're wrong, they're right. And so you see when there's dissonance like this, everyone's anxious except the person generating it. So if somebody's generating anxiety and they've never learned to carry it, they will never grow. And over the months and years, they get used to that this is the normal way of behaving, and the team get used to it. And then what happens is the team run out of energy and they're like, I've had enough. And then I've heard this so many times, Jim, the team says, well, we can't say something now. It's been going on for years. And I say, today's the day. You can say, hey, there's 2 problems here. One is your behavior. And the second one is how long we've let you get away. We have not served you well by letting you get away with this bad behavior so long.
Yeah.
But it's pretty simple. What you're just trying to do is make everybody responsible for their behavior and everybody take responsibility for the rough edges of their personality. We all have it. When I was the boss, my rough edge, if I got really tired and stressed, I got a little snappy with people. I got a little more aggressive and I've got filled with self-pity. And sometimes they would combine where I would say, no one has it harder than I do. I'd actually say that.
Say that out loud. Yeah.
I'm embarrassed by it, but I would say, but the difference was in my organization, anybody in the org chart could come to me and tell me how they experienced me when I wasn't well. And so some of my leaders under me would come to me and say, Steve, I don't think you realize you're not well right now because you just kind of shut the staff down with your little self-pity rant. Now, they're saying it kindly. We love each other. I know they're for me.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people work in an organization where I could never do that to the boss. I'd lose my job. Well, you're going to leave anyway, or you're going to stay and your soul's going to leave. You're just going to clock in. So that's a long answer, but that's what I would say.
I appreciate it. I mean, when Amanda and I were talking about this particular topic, our podcast does not run away from difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And I think that overarching theme with the Winning Through Culture podcast is to equip business leaders and entrepreneurs to really build a healthy winning culture. And that usually involves tackling tough issues. And this issue may be one of the more difficult ones because, as you said earlier, the leader has to be willing to be self-aware to identify what's going on for them and how they're showing up. Then you've got to create a culture where people feel safe to come and tell that to the leader. And to your point, a lot of leaders aren't open to that, which means that pathway is no longer a viable option. It's just kind of suck it up, buttercup, and see what happens.
So this is really interesting right here, Tim, because you give this to the leader, you get punished for it. Now you have a difficult decision to make, but every system, every group resists change.
Oh, yeah.
particularly when the leader has power. So when you say they're not open to that, that's true. And it also opens up an opportunity the next time to say to the leader, the last time I tried to tell you about this, you shut me down and put me in the doghouse. If that's your solution, let's be clear about it. But the problem still remains. And this is why we have HR turnover. This is why our exit interviews are always showing you have a choice to make. You can have an ego and pretend it's not happening, or you can actually dig deeper and work out. Like, now I understand this can almost sound naive, but most organizations won't tolerate high staff turnover because it's extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we have to keep shortening the leash on leaders behaving badly. And of course, I'm using the top leader. Sometimes the top leader is the one who's well, and it's a person who's always late and gossiping is the problem.
Yeah. So your faith is an important part of your journey. You've been pastor 26 years. This question may seem a little odd because, again, my faith's very important. We talk about it openly on this podcast, but you have a world that's very secular, and you have a subset of businesses that are run with more of a ministry mission focus. Do you see this as an issue independent of that dynamic, secular versus ministry, or is it lean one way or the other, Steve?
I love this question. I have taught this on 6 continents, except Antarctica. We haven't done Antarctica yet.
Well, it's cold there.
I've heard it's cold. In marketplace, secular, Christian, and I don't know how many cultures, but a couple of dozen cultures, I'd say.
Okay. So lots of different cultures.
Yep. I'm yet to find an environment where it isn't applicable. The difference is, I think the Christian has the benefit of the transformation of the Holy Spirit. And so I think we do have a competitive advantage on change. Whereas I think in the marketplace, somebody who does not have a faith journey, I don't have confidence that we can white knuckle our way to be well. I really do believe we need the love of God for humans to be well or to thrive, or what the Bible calls shalom. Yeah, like I've been in a lot of so-called secular environments with thousands of people, and they all nod their head. The challenge is, okay, what power are you depending on for change? Because I don't depend on my own power.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as I have gone through my own journey on this topic now for a year, I really came to appreciate this summer how much of this was spiritual, faith-based, more than anything else. And it is remarkable, both the peace that can be obtained internally, peace that transcends all understanding. But as much as my faith is important to me, as I, again, from the day of your talk last year, it was like, wait a minute, this thing I call stress is something different. I need to understand this. Obviously read your book and started to realize, wow, I'm not showing up all the time the way I want to.
Yeah.
With some pretty important people, both at home and at work. And I've put a lot of work in to make the change internally. And I'd like to think that it's made a difference in the business setting. But I know for me, at least, that the lesson that I keep coming back to is this is a matter of my spiritual development, not some kind of head knowledge or, how to be a better leader. It starts at that level of a core. And I was just curious as to what you had seen in both secular and non-secular environments.
Yeah.
So if a leader manages this well and tackles this well, what does the organization and the culture of that, organization look like?
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes, this is really emotional well-being work, right? Emotional health. And sometimes people say, oh yeah, that emotional health stuff, it's so like squishy, and we're trying to grow, we're trying to grow our business or grow our organization. And I tell them, oh yeah, this is the fastest way to growth. I know. A team that's well, where each person is taking responsibility for their own reactivity. Each person is increasing their capacity to absorb without catching and spreading. That's the most efficient way we do our work. I think of Yo-Yo Ma and the Apostle Paul as 2 examples. Like Yo-Yo Ma, I'm a musician and he's one of my favorite musicians. When he'd be considered not just the best cellist in the world, but one of the finest musicians in modern history. Mm-hmm. When you watch him play, it looks like he's playing. I mean, it looks like He is so filled with joy and freedom. But of course, he practices a ton so that when it's time to work, he's just in the flow. The Apostle Paul reminds me of that, Tim. Like, you couldn't touch that guy. Like, his circumstances were some of the most brutal recorded in human history, and yet he was always ready to worship and thank God, and it's really remarkable. Mm-hmm. So I think what it looks like is your management load goes down, your staff turnover goes down, because you're all helping each other manage your rough edges. Everyone has a bad day once in a while. It's not that you become a cop on outbursts. It's that you become a cop on a pattern of outbursts. And that's a really important distinction. So in my organization, everybody has the right to blow it once in a while. Make a mistake, be irritable, be really sad, underfunction and not hit a deadline. Everybody has the freedom to occasionally be that way. But if you're always missing a deadline, if you're always mansplaining, if you're always interrupting someone so you can get your point across, we're going to have a word with you. And so once you start to realize that, you become the place everyone wants to work for.
Yeah. In the instance you mentioned, where it's okay to occasionally be that way, does everybody knows that in the business and can openly speak to it?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, there have been a number of times where I'm the boss and I will say to my team, hey, I just want you to know this is what I'm carrying right now. So I'm probably not at my best. And I'd appreciate if you'd help me if you see something in me that's concerning. But even saying that makes me more connected to them. And then off we do our work. I used to think that being the leader meant that my job was to care for everybody. And, I'm a pastor, so that's kind of in the territory.
Innately in you. Yeah.
Yeah. But it really changed me when I realized, wait a minute, my job is not to care for everybody. My job is to create a culture where everybody is cared for. And that shifted for me. So my executive team cared for me as much as I cared for them.
Yeah.
Now, when we are helping each other, there's still an organizational hierarchy. I'm still the boss. I'm still fundamentally responsible. There are times where I have to make difficult decisions that they disagree with. But now, because I know they care, I'm not threatened by their disagreement. So some people, they railroad their decisions through versus what I would try to say is, hey, you might disagree. And there are some decisions where we take feedback. This is not one of them. This is a decision that is salute and execute. And you might disagree. I completely respect that, but here's what I need you to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, even that is a different posture than saying, look, either get on board or get off the boat. That kind of harsh. It's just so much of that kind of threatening language is almost always unnecessary in healthy leadership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a couple generations culturally of leadership that's how it was. And it, rooted all the way back to World War II. And, there were certainly in a wartime environment, a command and control dictates were important and might save lives, but in a general business setting, that rarely is the most effective path.
And also, Colin Powell, when he was the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was using this training in the military because what's also true is veterans come back from war and they really don't talk about the leaders that would do salute and execute. They talk about the leaders that they felt cared for by. They knew the leader would sacrifice himself for them. Like you start to see, even in military, these same values. Like he would take a bullet for me. I'll take a bullet for him. It's still based on love. It's an interesting dynamic to consider.
Yeah. And I think that what you just said there based on love is sometimes, I think, the root of it all. And again, that gets back to my spiritual and your spiritual view of the world. And yet it's funny, these topics that Amanda and I have been tackling in this series are stuff that some people would say, to your point, are squishy, they're soft.
Yeah.
This is, what are you guys doing here? This is feely good stuff. But I think what I have noticed, certainly in post-COVID world, is how real this topic is. And in the absence of identifying it and naming it and then, beginning to work on it, it's toxic in cultures of organizations. And it's toxic for the leader and the people that are being led by them. And it does result in, I think, less engagement in the workforce and turnover and a lot of things that don't need to happen, but do happen in the absence of it being checked up, for sure. So as we kind of look at this topic as a whole, what would be some practical takeaways for someone listening that they could look at for themselves and put into practice almost immediately?
Right. So it always starts with noticing. So pick a person that irritates you, a person you don't understand, or pick an event that makes you anxious. Now, if that's too much, then that's fine. Just turn on your TV and pick a TV show where there's a lot of drama. Most screenwriters for TV take the rules of well-being and intentionally break them to create good TV, right?
Yeah.
Like people are backbiting and all of the sideways energy. So if it's too on the nose to look at a person, then just turn on the TV and pick a drama and pay attention to the anxiety being spread. That'll get you a long way. That's where you always start. If you want to do deeper work, then you're starting to try to figure out, well, what are my triggers? So first step is notice and then name. What are my triggers? And then diffuse. We encourage everybody to make a life-giving list. And that's a list of people, places, and activities that God has given you as a gift. So, we're on video. My wall behind me is all life-giving things. I've got a cricket ball back there from my favorite sport. I've got a vinyl turntable, a piece of art. My guitar might be out of frame, but my dog often joins me on these podcasts, all these life-giving things. And anybody, if they want to, they can just go to stevecusswords.com and they can get these resources and start practicing for themselves. Or they can join I've got a podcast called Being Human. We do a lot of this work on there.
Yeah, I was going to recommend definitely the book, Managing Leadership Anxiety, Yours and Theirs, just as a great way to create awareness. Certainly highly endorse you as a speaker for organizations or leadership teams. Obviously, you've got the Capable Life, your website, and your podcast. So there's a lot of resources. I know, Steve, today, neither you or I are offering medical advice. Probably should have said that at the beginning.
That's right.
We're trying to bring awareness to a topic that's very real. It's probably, to your point about the contagion factor, spread through more and more workplaces than people even realize. And again, my own personal experience with this was A, last year becoming aware, B, starting to learn, study, and manage, again, what I thought was stress, my own anxieties. And it was tough to do and didn't get it right a lot. And then started to share that with some of the people closest to me to give them permission to speak into me. And those that had permission and had courage did that, which only accelerated my learning. And I am a much better person and I believe leader as a result of benefiting from hearing you and your work. And so I want to say a big thank you. The well-being, quality of life isn't just about money and things. It's about how you show up every day. And like I said, the peace that transcends all understanding inside. And I know the source of that for me is God, but I was definitely out of alignment in that way because of this topic. So it was a super important one for me to be able to spend some time with you. And I really appreciate you making the time to be with us today. And again, we will encourage people to follow you, not just on social media, because that may induce more anxiety, but on your podcast, which will help manage it, your book and your website. And again, look you up as a speaker. So thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, Tim, my pleasure. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Yeah. Well, another great episode of Winning Through Culture again here with our guest, Steve Cuss, author of Managing Leadership Anxiety, Yours and Theirs, and founder of Capable Life. Until we're together again, lean into what you learned today and see what you can do with it to make your organization and yourself a much better place.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful,
because your culture matters.